Okay, so thank everybody for being here. Um, this is our project. So basically, we made employment resource dashboard, and this kind of started out as an idea for us to kind of collect data so we can best present the trends, technologies, and job positions that are kind of really being prominent in the tech industry. And we were able to kind of look at that throughout the 4 different cities that TKH Fellowship will now be hosted in, which is Atlanta, Los Angeles, Newark, and New York City. So we had a little bit of issue in the beginning, some challenges trying to actually scrape and collect the data, but we were successful in being able to do so after using the Google Jobs API. And that resulted in a data set of like about 7,000 different positions. And some of the positions that we looked at were software engineer, data analyst, data scientist, web developer, front-end developers, back-end developers, and UX UI designers.
Yes, and the one thing we would probably add if we were doing this again is cybersecurity, since that's
The program for TKH.
yeah. Alrighty, so let me jump in. So this right here is sort of like our comprehensive view of like all 4 of our cities. So in terms of like the tech jobs that we were able to get back, so over like 7,000 plus. From this chart, you can see that obviously like New York had the most tech jobs. And when looking at this chart, it can kind of be a bit misleading. You can think, okay, Newark doesn't have like a lot of tech jobs, but when you think of it in correlation to the actual population, all of these cities right here are well over the millions, while Newark is still in the thousands. So the 100,000s and plus. So it's necessary to keep that in mind when looking at this chart. One thing that I found really interesting, however, was how large like Atlanta was. So out of these cities here, Atlanta is actually the sort of like the 3rd in terms of population. But here, when you look at the bar, you can see in terms of like tech roles, there's like a lot more compared to Los Angeles. And, we think of like Los Angeles and Cali, like that's where all the tech is. But you can see clearly here that there's like a lot, going on tech wise in Atlanta. And it's definitely a place to continue to keep our eye out on. So TKH definitely did a good job making Atlanta one of their focus. So also we wanted to look at sort of the overall distribution of schedule types of our jobs. So a lot of schedule types was actually full-time. And as you see here, internship was definitely the smallest. So, it being hard for us to get internships, it makes sense because like a lot of the tech roles that are out there are requiring for full-time, and then next followed by a contract. And we also just kind of wanted to like break it up to get a visual of the schedule types based on the job roles. So we broke it up into 2 charts. So one of our charts is just looking at full-time roles. So here you can see here that in looking at all the jobs, front-end developer has like the sort of the highest in regards to like full-time. And now if you look at the distribution of the other 3, contract, internship, part-time, you can see that there's a lot of contract work when looking at like a front-end developer. And I think that's just really interesting and like something to keep in mind when we're like searching for roles and things. All right, now I'm gonna go over to Atlanta. Let me scroll up. All right.
Yeah, and just to talk about the previous chart that we saw, I found it very interesting because even when I was looking for like data analyst internships or even data science internships, I found it a little bit hard to find those types of roles compared to other job postings. So when we saw that data, for me, it was like, oh, that kind of makes sense why it was kind of hard for me to find those. So yeah, so something else that we wanted to see for our cities was looking at the top technologies for the per role per city. So right now we're gonna go into Atlanta and just kind of walk you through some of the things that we saw. So overall, as you notice here, the front end developer had the highest number of job postings. But if you do mind going down, okay,
Oh,
I can
yeah,
go down.
Yeah, you can go ahead.
So if you go down here, so now we broke it down by job title. So the first one we're going to be looking at is software engineer in Atlanta, Georgia. So what we did is that yeah, we just wanted to see the top 10 technologies per role. So for our software engineer, we noticed that Scala came up to the most number of like frequencies, or the number of times that it showed up in job descriptions. And then the next was Java and SQL. So, and then now for, if you look at data analysts in Atlanta, we saw that SQL and then Python follow along with the top, having just the highest number of like, I guess, a frequency that, or number of times that they show up in job descriptions. And now if we look at data scientists, we see Python, but we see machine learning. And, you know, this, we thought it makes sense. Right. Thank you, Jessica. We thought this made sense now, because when we were going through the different like jobs within the data science, we learned that, you know, with machine learning, that's more so for data scientists, for example, than what you would do as a data analyst. So we thought that was very interesting. And of course, it was important to have those statistics for someone going for data as a data scientist. And then for web developer, so, oh, thank you, Clarissa. So we saw how here, some of the top here include Java, HTML, JavaScript, and CSS. So kind of go, I think it's matching with what we've, what the technologies that the Knowledge House is teaching us, or at least teaching on the web dev side. And then for backend, we decided to also split it up for backend and front-end developers. And we also saw Java, Scala, JavaScript as being the top technologies, followed by React and Git. And then for, okay, sorry, let me go up. Okay, so yeah, so then the last one we looked at was the UI UX. So some of the top technologies that we saw were Git, Adobe, HTML, and CSS, and including Figma. We saw that showing up the most in the job descriptions for UI UX designers in Georgia. So now we're gonna go on and review what we noticed for Los Angeles.
So one thing that I thought was really interesting when doing this project as well is like understanding that how the proximity to Silicon Valley and how each kind of like city has gotten its name. So Atlanta is deemed to be like the Silicon Valley of the South, and Los Angeles is now very like home to like Silicon Beach, as they would say. So in looking at that, we know that Los Angeles is also like very close to Hollywood and the entertainment industry. So we want to see if that had any play into the kind of jobs and skills that would be needed in Los Angeles. So here we see that the front end developer and software engineer have more of the job postings that we saw for Los Angeles. And as we go down to look at the top technologies required, we see also that Scala and Java were pretty in the forefront for software engineers. For the data analyst role, similar to Atlanta, the SQL came out on top. We also see a lot for Python and Tableau. So understanding those technologies will also be important for a data analyst role. For data scientists, we have Python, and then we have SQL here, kind of differing from Atlanta in the second position, and then we have machine learning. For web developers, we have Java and then CSS and then JavaScript. So those kind of like the top three. Front end developers, we have Java, then JavaScript, and React, our top three. And then the back end developers, we see this reemergence of Scala, we have Java, we also have AWS. And then lastly, for the UX UI designers, similar to Atlanta, we see Git, but we also see that Figma and Adobe are a little higher than recently for Atlanta. So these are the technologies for the different roles in Los Angeles. So now we're going to take a little trip to Newark.
All righty. All right. Do I got remote control now? Yes, I do. Alrighty, so we are taking it to Newark. So as you see here, Newark is definitely like an up and coming city, and being like right next to NYC, it is quite important. And there's a lot of tech industry and things coming up in that area as well. So just looking at this chart right here, you can see that in Newark, software engineer is very, very high. So Newark is definitely in need of a lot of software engineers. Now, if you scroll down in terms of like top technologies, you will see a similar thing. For software engineers in Newark, you have your Scala, Java, and your AWS. Shout out to the Knowledge House for giving us this AWS certification.
Right.
Yeah, so if you scroll down here, you'll see SQL, Scala, and Tableau for your data analyst. And this is actually something I just want to bring like attention to. I kind of like mentioned, but like this important step, like just the showing of Tableau always coming up specifically for data analysts. And I've also been realizing like in the field and like starting work that Tableau is something that is like often used. So that's something that TKH may want to consider, maybe like partnering, see if we can get like free, subscription to it or something like that, because I think it's very essential to the work that data analysts and even data scientists do as well. So scrolling down to the technologies for data scientists, you have your Scala, Python, machine learning, and your SQL, and so on. Top technologies required for employees for web development in Newark is actually Java. So I'm going to be honest with you. For me, I actually find it quite surprising that Java came up so much. I initially thought that it was going to just be like, JavaScript, CSS, HTML, and then I don't know, maybe Java afterwards. But it's pretty clear that Java is actually really important. So maybe for our web developers, Java may be something that you look to learning, or maybe something TKH may think to consider adding to the program as well. Now for technologies for front end, for front end developers, you have Java here again, JavaScript, React coming up here, HTML and CSS and so on. Now your top technologies for backend developers in Newark, you have your Scala, Java, JavaScript, which actually I find very interesting here for backend developers, your SQL, AWS, and so on. And lastly, for your UI UX, you have Git, Adobe, CSS, Java, and so on. And so another recommendation I'd say is like, if there's a way to sort of like partner and get like subscription for like some of these things like Adobe and so on, maybe that could be something the Knowledge House looks into. And lastly, like I'm glad that Figma was, for me, brought to my attention through like the Knowledge House, and it's very clear that it's really important. Now on to our beloved New York City.
Okay. Let's see.
Okay, gotcha.
Okay, good. So let me just go. Yeah, so the last one is New York City, right? So we just wanted to analyze once again for the technologies that are very popular in the New York space. And here, as you can see, we have front-end developer showing up the most compared to the other ones, followed by software engineer. But yeah, that was interesting. So for software engineers, so some of them are like something that we did talk about, how maybe maybe the technologies might have been very similar across the different cities, right? Because if you're looking at a software engineer, they're looking at the same, or at least a similar technologies, but I'm glad that we broke it down by city because they were not necessarily the same, but there were definitely some technologies that do show up constantly, as you can see here, Scala, Java. But then here it seems like also Python is a good language to have for in New York. So then if we go for a data analyst, again, we're here with our SQL, Python, Tableau, and as Chioma had mentioned, right, with the AWS, so that's a great move that the Knowledge House is doing in teaching us, or sorry, helping us get that certification. Oops, I think I went too fast. Hold on. Yep, so then for our data scientists, so we see that Python, machine learning, SQL, and also along with statistics and Scala. So and again, we see that AWS showing up again. So for our web developers, we have Java, JavaScript, HTML, and CSS showing up as the top technologies, because again, these are the top 10 technologies per job role. And then for our front-end developers, we have Java, JavaScript, React, but SQL also shows up here as part of the top 10 technologies to know for front-end developers, or the ones that showed up the most in the job descriptions for New York. And then for our backend, we have Scala, Java, SQL, and AWS, pretty up there. Right, and then for lastly, our UI UX, important to have those Git skills. Adobe and Figma again is showing up again in our project along with AWS. So yeah, so these are some of the these are some of the metrics and important information that we gather from the information from all our job postings. And this is us.